Okay, good. Is everybody there? All right. Good morning, everyone. We're here to talk about Senate Bill 430, a bill designed to ensure that Connecticut is no longer connected to the death penalty going forward. In 2012, Connecticut abolished the death penalty because those were the values of those here in the state and the residents of Connecticut. Unfortunately, in recent years, too many executions around the country have connected straight back to the state because corporations are providing the drugs and medical devices necessary for the death penalty executions all over the country. It is absolutely critical that corporations are not profiting from executions. 13 people were murdered between 2020 and 2021 by the first Trump administration. And the drugs used in those executions were sourced right here from Connecticut. Even with new methods being developed all over the country, like nitrogen suffocation in Alabama, those medical devices, the respiratory masks being used, are coming from Connecticut. We need to intervene, and Senate Bill 430 lets us do just that. And it reflects the values of many industries that have already exited the death penalty. Over 60 major pharmaceutical companies have barred their drugs from being used in executions. And this continues in that legacy. And this is incredibly timely as the Trump administration has now released executive orders to expand the use of the death penalty. Today, we are urging our legislators here in Connecticut to support Senate Bill 430 with a hearing. And with that, I want to introduce some of our speakers today, starting with State Representative Josh Elliott.
I have introduced Senate Bill 430 with my colleagues, Senator Saud Anwar and Senator C.C. Marr. For 13 years, Connecticut has made the public claim through the legislature, through the governor's office, that we believe that unnecessary killing, mandated government killing, is not what we want to represent. There is a way to serve justice, but there's also a way to ensure that we are practicing what we preach. And if the government allows killing, then we are implicitly saying that there are circumstances where we can and should allow this. It is my belief that government is what we use as a tool to represent our ideals and to represent who we want to be. And when I found a few years ago that in my district in Hamden in the 88th, that there was an organization that was supplying the methodology to end people's lives, and that was being used in other states for the death penalty, I and Bianca and allies made it very public that this is not something that we wanted, not only in my town, but also in the state of Connecticut. And now what we're doing is we're moving forward to the legislative process to ensure that not only are they not creating those goods, but that we are ensuring that they aren't being sold in other states. And there are limitations to what we can and can't do, and part of what we're doing today is putting this bill forward to the General Law Committee and getting the chairs and getting the members of that committee to begin hearing this idea so that we can flesh out exactly what we want to do. We are confident that we'll be able to pass this bill this year. We're confident that we have allies in the legislative branch to ensure that this bill becomes law. It is important not only to myself, but it's important to the families, loved ones who have gone through circumstances that touch on the death penalty, not only in our state, but around the country as well. And so that is why I have happily introduced this bill with my colleagues, hope to get more co-sponsors, and hope to make this law.
Thank you so much, Representative Elliott. And with that, I do want to read the statement that Senator Saud Anwar presented, who is unable to be here today. It has been more than a dozen years since Connecticut abolished the death penalty, sending a clear moral message and imperative to our state, its residents, and its businesses. Ensuring devices and drugs made in our state does not just ensure this standard is upheld, but prevents serious potential legal trouble risked by companies supplying such materials. This bill ensures our state walks the walk in the name of human rights, ethical judgment, and indeed in protecting the livelihoods of state businesses. And with that, I would like to invite David McGuire, the Executive Director of the ACLU of Connecticut.
Thank you, Bianca, and thank you to the legislators that raised this bill. This is a very important bill. Like Bianca said, it's very, very crucial that we pass this session. Connecticut spoke loudly 12 years ago when we abolished the death penalty, and we should have absolutely no role in or be complicit in executions elsewhere. It's a timely bill in that President Trump and the Project 2025 memo from the Heritage Foundation calls for a ramping up of the federal death penalty. We as our state should not have any role in providing either the tools or medicine for that execution to happen. So we are standing with these folks, shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, and going to push forward for this session. This is also a huge issue for the ACLU of Connecticut because it is a racial justice issue. We know that just under half of the folks executed in the United States are Black or brown, largely out of whack with the population of the United States. And again, this is an issue that we need to take seriously. We call on the legislature to push this through this session, and we will be here the entire way. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you for your partnership here in Connecticut. I want to read also the statement from Senator CC Marr, who also couldn't join us today. Connecticut has long rejected the death penalty, recognizing it as deeply flawed, inhumane practice that has no place in a just society. It is unacceptable that a Connecticut-based company has been complicit in supplying lethal injection drugs. With SB 430, we are taking a firm stand to ensure that no business operating in our state profits from state-sanctioned killing. And with that, I want to invite Lisa Brown, the mother of Christopher Villalba, who's one of the 13 people executed by the first Trump administration.
This is always hard for me. I was devastated when I found out that these drugs are being supplied from this state, from a business within this state. And it's especially egregious to me that this is a non-death penalty state, for God's sake, and yet it's still being allowed. My son was the 7th of the 13 to be killed using the drugs provided by that company. And I literally saw evidence that he was affected by the drug before he lost consciousness. This cannot continue. It is absolutely horrifying for those of us that are at that end of the issue. It's just unconscionable to me that they can do this through secrecy, behind closed doors and cloaked in secrecy. We have to do something about that, and I hope that people will support this Senate bill to stop it in this state, so that that particular company and others within this state can never do it again. Thank you.
Next, I want to bring up James Jetter, the Executive Director of the Full Citizens Action Coalition.
Good morning. I'm James Jetter, the Executive Director of the Full Citizens Coalition. I'm a Connecticut-based action group that seeks to undo the unjust harm of felon disenfranchisement till all citizens are seen as full citizens. I'm here today, and there's a lot that's been said, and in preparing notes, you get the same notes. I'm from the state. It was a big deal for me while incarcerated to see that we put an end to a practice that, even though we didn't practice often, still was left there. And when practices are left, what we do know is that when the wrong people come into power, some of those practices, they come back around. The purpose of government, a large purpose of government in this country, is to make sure that corporations are properly regulated, to make sure that they do no harm. It is a failure of this state to know that there are 13 people who are no longer alive due to what was produced and solicited in this state. I don't want that blood on my hands. All tax dollars aren't worth it. We need to buckle down and decide who we are as a state. Like, what is the standard? What is the moral ground? Who will we not harm? And we need to be consistent. And our politicians need to be consistent. But this is a cry. SB 430 must pass this year. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And with that, I would like to invite Scott Langley, co-founder of Death Penalty Action.
Good morning. I also stand here before you to support this bill 430. I'm Scott Langley with Death Penalty Action. We are a strictly death penalty abolition organization to work to stop executions. We had, during the Trump administration, we had over 500,000 people join us to stand against the death penalty. I also represent Amnesty International USA. I am the state abolition death penalty coordinator for the Northeast region, which Amnesty International, as a worldwide organization, has millions of members, including over 1 million here in the United States. And I bring the voices of these people to the table to say that we know the death penalty is wrong. And I personally haven't been impacted by the death penalty like Lisa has. I haven't been a family of an executed prisoner. I haven't been the family of a murder victim family. I haven't myself been wrongfully incarcerated. These are the powerful voices of the work to end the death penalty. But I have stood time and time again outside of a prison to bear witness against the atrocity of the death penalty in this country and what it does to people, the collateral damage that it leaves in its wake. And I cannot tell you how many times I've stood outside of prisons and been with people like Lisa to see those grieving mothers when the government takes the life of their child. And this is something that cannot stand, to have a state like Connecticut that has sided on the right side of the moral majority by ending the death penalty here in 2012. And Connecticut, as we heard, can't have its blood on its hands. It needs to walk the talk. It needs to practice what we preach in the state of Connecticut to end the death penalty. And this bill will help ensure that we are consistent with our morals and our values and with worldwide human rights about how we treat our prisoners. And as we heard, there was companies that provided the drugs that allowed the execution of 13 prisoners under the Trump administration. And Lisa's son, Christopher, was one of those tragic losses. And we are faced with the reality in Connecticut that other companies are providing the apparatus and ability for government, state, and federal government to continue executing people. And there's another company in the state of Connecticut, Walter Surface Technologies, that is manufacturing a gas mask. It's supposed to be a respiratory mask used for good, just as drugs can be used for good. But this mask was used just last week at an execution in Alabama to take the life of a prisoner. And that's coming from Connecticut. Connecticut is implicitly involved in the execution of prisoners without, I think, the state wanting to appear to be aligned in that way, because the state has said that is it against the death penalty. It can't happen here in the state of Connecticut, yet we're complicit in that happening elsewhere. And so I just stand here before you to say that we cannot have more Lisas out there weeping for their children. We cannot have prisoners executed in the state of Alabama wearing these masks, because someone here in Connecticut is profiting from this, and that is wrong, and that needs to change. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all our speakers today. And I want to end on a note around sort of the intentions and desires of victims. I think often in these conversations, we talk about those who are sitting, those who are, if their interests and their families' interests are different than those in the interest of victims and their families. As somebody who has lost their partner to violence and to murder, I can tell you myself that I do not stand for the death penalty, and that there are many victims like myself and others who feel the same way. I'm the executive director of Worth Rises. We are a national criminal justice organization working to end the exploitation of people who are incarcerated and dismantle the prison industry that has been built around incarceration, including the death penalty. And we are fervently supporting Senate Bill 430 for passage this year. Thank you. That's
Good,
okay.
Ken.
We have
It's good to
questions.
have- it's good to have you.
Yeah.
Not on CTN schedule. I've been on the closed circuit TV. Audio isn't even on